Alright, so Polnareff. This character is honestly quite good, and I think one of the things that makes him so good is just how simple and easy he is to play and do well with. I think a lot of the time people don't really take this into consideration when they're talking about how good a character is, but I think ease of use absolutely plays a factor in whether or not a character is good or not. Because you can have a character with a really high skill ceiling, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good for most of the players playing the game. And I do make these reviews keeping in mind the normal players and the more competitive and higher up players. And if you're one of those players that isn't quite as good, Polnareff is probably going to be a godsend, because this character you can do quite well with and is very simple to use. I won't harp on too much longer with that though, so let's hop into the moveset and talk about what Polnareff has access to. So, as per usual, when starting off talking about movesets, I'll talk about the M1s first, and Polnareff is the first one to differ from the usual trend. He only has a 4-hit mouse 1 combo. This is because his mouse 1s have more range, but in order to balance this out, they do 1 more damage than the other stands. So it still comes out to 12 damage if you do 3 hits as opposed to 4 for the other stands, but it is an interesting thing to note. And as I've done with every single other stand character I've covered, your stand attacks give you a massive advantage because you have more range, and your stand is intangible when you use it to attack, meaning other people can't hit it. Also, as I've already stated, Polnareff has more range than even other stand characters because of his sword, so this makes landing M1s a whole lot easier, but at the expense of not having as many to rely on. Polnareff's 1 is a simple barrage that does 0.35 per hit. An interesting note about Polnareff's barrage is that a lot of times if you get too close to it, they'll be able to pop out of it. This happens with other stand barrages, but it feels like it happens a lot more with Polnareff's compared to others. And I don't have footage of it, but you'll see it in the gameplay where sometimes the final hit of Polnareff's barrage just doesn't connect and doesn't knock them back. Anyways, Polnareff's 2 is Circle Slash, a move that's honestly really bad, but I'll talk about that later. It's an AoE attack that has quite a bit of startup and deals 15 damage. Polnareff's 3 is Sand Kick, which doesn't deal any damage but does stun and has a pretty generous hitbox. It also comes out very quickly. Polnareff's 4 is Rapier Thrust, a move that deals 15 damage in front of you, has a decently long charge up time but can't be cancelled by being hit. And finally, Polnareff's 5 is I forget what it's called, so I'll get back to you on that one. Finally, Polnareff's 5 is Rapier Shot, which fires the blade of your rapier at your opponent. It's a very fast traveling projectile that deals 15 damage and can break blocks. It also looks small but has a pretty generous hitbox. Now, when Polnareff deals enough damage to his opponents, he can press X to shed his armor and gain an entirely new moveset, as you obtain Silver Chariot without his armor. Your barrage is buffed up to do 0.45 damage instead of 0.35 damage, as well as having a much larger hitbox, considering that you have the after images of 2 other Silver Chariots alongside the original. Your 2 is After Image Thrust, which is pretty much identical to your Rapier Thrust, except for it deals 5 more damage, bumping it up to 20 damage. As well as obviously having a larger hitbox. Your 3 becomes After Image Slash, which is basically just a massive AoE move that's in front of you that does 20 damage. Side note, if you missed this move, I have no idea how you managed to pull that off, and I'm impressed. Which after a short startup, you teleport behind the opponent, stab them through the gut, and it deals 20 damage. And your 5 is Chariot Requiem, which is effectively time stop in a massive area that comes out unreactably fast. During this, your opponents are asleep, their screen is completely black, and they can't control their character. Basically, it means you can do whatever you want to them. And the final plus to your Awakening is that your M1s are buffed up from doing 4 damage a hit to doing 5 damage a hit, which is kind of nice. But with that, the moveset is done, so let's move on to strategies and B&Bs. So starting off with your BNBs, Sand Kick is your friend. You can use Sand Kick to combo M1s into more M1s, guaranteeing you 24 damage. Now as for what you can do after the second set of M1s, you have 2 options. You can go for a Barrage, which is basically the correct choice, or you can go for a Circle Slash. Both of these moves do about the same amount of damage, but the thing about the Circle Slash is it's kind of strange on how it operates. I don't think it's a true combo, but it kind of looks like one. It's weird. I just wouldn't go for it. Stick with the barrage. You could also technically go for a mix-up and use rapier thrust, but if your opponent sees this coming, number one, they could perfect block it if they know what they're doing, and number two, it has such a long startup that they can probably get away. This tactic will work against a lot of people, but it's not really worth it. Just do the barrage. As for your awakening, you can do 3 M1s into literally any of the moves, so I won't even bother covering B&Bs for the awakening and will more focus on what you can do out of Chariot Requiem. Chariot Requiem is obviously very good. You can use it to guarantee yourself basically 80% of someone's health if all of your moves are off cooldown. Explaining what to use in Chariot Requiem is kind of pointless, but what I will say to you is basically use everything but Sword Leap. Personally, the best strategy for me that I've seen is to try to get a click in and then use all your moves and then end it with a click combo, and it leaves them with just enough health that one Sword Leap will finish them off. The timing for this is extremely tight, but everything is true up until the Sword Leap. What you just saw on screen probably isn't true, but you can do it. Now hopping into general strategies on how you should use each move, just ignoring B&Bs. Your barrage can be used to catch people because the hitbox on it compared to a lot of other barrages is very large. So honestly, sometimes using this move to catch people is a better use of it than in your B&Bs, and then you can try to use Circle Slash in the B&B, but I already talked about how that's kind of unreliable. When it comes to Circle Slash, the reason this move is so bad is because it gets canceled by you getting hit with literally anything. And M1 is enough to cancel this move. It makes you stand perfectly still, has quite a bit of end lag, it can be blocked, all around, it basically just never hits outside of a B&B, and I almost want to say just don't use it at all and ignore it in your kit because it's really just not good. As for Sand Kick, this one's interesting because I see a lot of people just using this wrong. All I have to tell you when it comes to Sand Kick is don't use it outside of a B&B combo. I see a lot of people trying to approach with Sand Kick, and I don't really see why you would do this. Your M1s serve the same purpose as Sand Kick, except for they do damage and can combo into Sand Kick. So I really just don't see as to why so many people use Sand Kick to approach. I think it might just be an ignorance thing where they want to use a move since they have it, but if you're using it this way, you're using it all wrong. You should basically only ever use Sand Kick to combo M1s into more M1s for your B&B. Anything outside of that is a waste. As for Rapier Thrust, this one is very, very situational depending on who you're playing against. It's one of the easiest moves in the entire game to perfect block, as seeing it start up, it has a massive amount of it, so it's really easy to just react to it and perfect block it. But on the other hand, a lot of people in TB2 never perfect block any moves, and I honestly don't perfect block very many moves either, this being one of the few of them. So what I would say about this is if your opponent is very aggressive, this is a really good move to use. It punishes their aggressiveness, and since it doesn't get canceled by anything else, even if they hit you, they're still gonna take the damage. It's also a really, really good move to break your teammates out of combos and 2v2s, seeing as it can't get canceled by anything and cancels other moves. That's what gives it a huge leg up over Circle Slash. Circle Slash you can't use to free your teammates because if the enemy hits you at all, it gets auto-canceled. But with Rapier Thrust, this is not a problem. So hands down, its best use is in order to be used to free your teammates from combos and to punish over-aggressive players. Rapier Shot is an interesting case because if you're using it against projectile characters that know what they're doing, it has so much end lag on it that if you miss, they will almost certainly punish you with one of their projectiles. But going up against anyone who doesn't have a projectile, you might as well just throw this one out whenever you have it off cooldown, otherwise you're just losing damage. And in regards to that, even if your opponent does have projectiles, you should use this as much as you can. It's a very easy to land, fast moving projectile that deals 15 damage and breaks blocks. There's basically no reason whatsoever not to use this projectile. So whenever you have it, just throw it out. Polnareff's Awakening is honestly really interesting when comparing it to the other Awakenings, at least the ones that I've played, because it feels like you use a lot of Polnareff's moves and then they go on cooldown for an eternity and you can't do anything but M1 for most of your Awakening. This is an unfortunate fact, but it is the way it is, and as sad as it sounds, the most optimal way to play Polnareff's Awakening is to just not engage until you have cooldowns. There's no reason to try to get that extra 1 damage damage on each click, because all you're doing by doing that is potentially getting comboed and losing your awakening. When it comes to what you should use in the awakening and when you should use it, basically you should use Chariot Requiem as soon as you get it, and then use all your moves in order to try to kill the guy straight out with it. And then if you don't kill them, wait until something comes back, because trying to kill them afterwards with nothing but M1s is nothing short of suicide, especially since by this point they've probably got all their moves back off of cooldown. Outside of Chariot Requiem, you just kind of throw out your moves, and they have such ginormous hitboxes that if you're missing them, the only blame really falls on yourself. It's very hard to miss the awakening attacks, so you just kind of chuck them out while they're off of cooldown. Well, everything other than Sword Leap. Sword Leap is interesting because it's the only attack in your entire awakening kit other than your barrage that can be blocked. Blocking Sword Leap is really easy. You just hear them scream, "Sokoda!" and then you block, and then he doesn't scream Silver Chariot because it doesn't hit you. Also, I probably butchered that pronunciation, so apologies if anyone's Japanese. But no, it's very easy to block this move, so the real play is to just try to use it when your opponent is off guard, and most good players will just never get hit by it. It's very hard to get punished by using this move as long as you use it at the maximum range, but trying to use it at close range is really dumb, so don't try to do that. Well, I suppose you could, but you would have to have a really good read on your opponent at that point and know that they're not going to block it and they're just going to panic at close range. But with that, I really don't think I have too much else to say when it comes to Polnareff. He's really easy to play, and I don't even think this guide is necessary, but I did have people asking for it, and I do plan to do all the characters, so I suppose this one's done. This is conclusion talk though, so let's jump into that. Honestly, Polnareff is so much fun to play, and I think the reason he's so much fun to play is just how brain-dead easy it is to use him. And I don't even mean that as an insult. It really is nice to be able to use a character that's just really easy to use. Obviously, he has his drawbacks and doesn't have nearly as massive of a skill ceiling as other characters, but he doesn't need that, because he does what he's able to do just fine. His awakening is very strong, but it's nothing standout overpowered. I think the lack of a 5th click does help, because it stops people from just spamming out his clicks in order to get damage. Obviously, you still do this, but it's to a lessened extent, so I get why they did it. And I don't think any of the moves are just outright broken. All around, Polnareff is just, well, balanced, and reviewing characters like that doesn't give me too much to say, because normally in conclusions or during it, I either say this character sucks or this stand sucks or whatever, or I say this is broken and here's why. But when talking about Polnareff, I'm just sitting here saying, yeah, here's what you should use and he's good. That's about all. So honestly, I don't think there's anything else I have to tell you here. We're pretty much done. Polnareff's fun. If you haven't given him a shot yet, he's pretty good. For those that only play casually in the party games mode, he's good there too. And that's about all. So have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Psych, future Eclipse here, and I forgot to include the fact that people absolutely hate fighting against Polnareff. Enjoy this montage of people rage quitting. Oh, lag, and then he rage quits. I'm just trying to get footage.